The air was thick with laughter and clinking wine glasses. The dim glow of the chandelier cast warm reflections on the polished oak dining table. I sat among our friends, smiling politely as they engaged in lively conversations. It was one of those dinner parties my husband, Richard, loved to host, a gathering of successful professionals, businessmen, and their elegant wives. I had grown used to playing the part of the quiet, supportive spouse. Richard was the star, the accomplished banker with a sharp suit and an even sharper tongue. I had once been ambitious, full of dreams, but years of his dismissive words had dulled my sparkle. Then, just as the conversation turned to careers and financial independence, Richard decided to humiliate me in front of everyone. "Don't fool yourself, darling," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You will never be independent. Some people just weren't born to shine." Laughter rippled through the room, some nervous, some genuine. I felt the blood drain from my face. The walls seemed to close in on me. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile, pretending his words didn't slice through me like a knife. I glanced at my best friend, Angela, who sat frozen, her fork hovering midair. Her eyes, filled with shock and fury, met mine. I quickly looked away. I couldn't afford to let them see how much it hurt. But deep inside, something shifted. That night, as I lay beside my husband in bed, listening to his soft snores, I made a silent promise to myself: this will not be my story. I will prove him wrong. The next morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Richard had always dismissed my dreams, but I had never given up entirely. I had skills, ideas, and a fierce hunger to reclaim my life. I spent days researching, planning, and making calls. I reached out to an old mentor who once believed in me. I reconnected with people I had lost touch with. I worked late into the night, hidden away in my home office, putting together a business plan that had been buried in my heart for years. Richard barely noticed. He was too busy planning a major financial move, an investment that required a hefty loan from his bank. He walked around the house with the smug confidence of a man who thought he had everything under control. But life had a surprise waiting for him. A month after that humiliating dinner, Richard walked into his bank with his usual arrogance. He had always been a respected client, a man with connections and influence. He expected a smooth approval. But as he sat across from the loan officer, something changed. The bank manager, an older gentleman with piercing eyes, flipped through the documents. Then, he leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Richard, I see your wife recently opened a business account with us. Quite a promising one, in fact." Richard's face twisted in confusion. "My wife? That must be a mistake." The manager smiled. "No mistake. She's been handling significant transactions. In fact, her company has a stronger financial projection than your current investments." Richard's breath hitched. His fingers tightened around the chair's armrest. "My wife? Independent? Successful? Impossible." His world tilted. And at that moment, he realized, he had underestimated the woman he thought would never shine. Richard sat frozen in his chair, his mind racing. His wife, had gone behind his back and built something substantial enough to be recognized by the bank. "Would you like me to continue processing your loan request?" the manager asked, tilting his head slightly. Richard cleared his throat, forcing a nod. He needed the loan to secure a high-stakes investment, and for the first time in his life, he felt an uneasy sense of powerlessness. As he walked out of the bank, his thoughts were a whirlwind. How did she do it? When did she do it? He had always controlled their finances, ensured she stayed in the background. But somehow, she had found a way. That evening, he arrived home earlier than usual. He found me sitting in the study, my laptop open, papers neatly stacked beside me. I didn't look up when he entered. "You went behind my back," he finally said, his voice low. I lifted my eyes to his, my expression unreadable. Behind your back. Or did you just never bother to look? He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. Since when did you? Since the night you humiliated me in front of our friends, I interrupted, my tone even. Since the night you told me I would never be independent. For the first time in our marriage, Richard had no comeback. In the following weeks, the dynamic in our household began to shift. Richard was no longer the untouchable, self-assured man he had always been. He watched me closer now, watched as I attended meetings, received calls from potential investors, and walked into rooms with an air of confidence I had never displayed before. One evening, he attempted to regain control. Maybe it's time we focus on family again, he said, setting his glass of whiskey down on the table. All this work you're doing, it's unnecessary. I provide for us. I let out a soft chuckle. Do you? His jaw tightened. Careful, he warned. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Richard, I said, my voice calm but firm. You said some people weren't born to shine. You were wrong. I was always meant to shine, you just spent years trying to dim my light. He had nothing to say to that. 2 months later, the final blow came. Richard's loan had been approved, but his investment turned out to be a disaster. He had placed his money in a failing venture, believing his connections would salvage it. They didn't. The debt was suffocating. His once thriving confidence had crumbled.